Now these are some of the most mysterious supernatural cases that we could find. It's so fascinating, from a man that some believe could never die, to a Navy disappearance that will send shivers down your spine. His 5 biggest supernatural mysteries that could not be explained. Let's begin. Number 1. On August 1942, something strange seemed to happen in Daly City, California. Daly City was a quiet suburb, so imagine their shock when at 11:30 AM they witnessed a huge Navy blimp descending from the sky. It eventually crashed on the ground. The engine smashed into the pavement, gasoline was pouring into the street, and it didn't help that it was later determined that there was a bomb on board the blimp. Even though the people were reassured that the bomb would only detonate in water, there still must have been a huge amount of fear and shock. Now let's get to the mysterious part. The firemen and the people rushed to save the crew that were inside the blimp, but when they entered the blimp, there was no crew on board. It's like they just vanished. Maybe the pilots evacuated the blimp already, but the parachutes were still on board and tightly put away in their normal spots. Even the lifeboats were still attached, so where were the crew? Who was flying the blimp? The Navy was also puzzled by what happened, and searched for the crew by air, land and even sea, but they couldn't find the crew. They couldn't find no clues as to where they disappeared. It became known in the media as the Ghost Blimp. The pilots were Lieutenant Ernest Dewitt Cody and Ensign Charles E. Adams. Both men had years of experience aboard lighter than airships. They were said to have been in good spirits and health on the morning of the accident. The last message that the Navy ever heard from the crew was when one of the pilots radioed warning them that they were investigating a suspicious oil leak, a sign that there was a submarine in the area. It's certainly puzzling. The pilots are obviously missing, but how are they missing? They either jumped, but why would they jump without taking the parachutes or safety boat? The only other way is someone somehow managed to get into the blimp, but once again, how did they get them out? Did the enemies use their own parachutes? It's certainly bizarre. It's like they just vanished. Another problem was that a brief suitcase was discovered in the blimp, suggesting that whatever happened so quick that the pilots couldn't throw the confidential suitcase out of the blimp, which makes it highly unlikely that someone came on board to kidnap them. The engines were slowed down. One theory was that the door malfunctioned. One of the pilots fell out, and the other pilot fell out trying to rescue the other pilot. Whatever happened, their bodies were never discovered, and it still remains as one of the greatest mysteries. Number 2. Have you ever felt like someone is watching you in the darkness, but when you turn your light on, there's no one there? On December 29th, 1972, an Eastern jetliner, Flight 401, crashed into a Florida swamp. There were 163 passengers and 13 crew members that were on board the plane that was flying to Florida. The crash took the lives of 101 people. Most of them died instantly. The pilot Bob Loft and the flight engineer Don Repo both died of Flight 401. Although most of the plane was destroyed, some parts were reusable, such as the galley. This was to be reused and were fitted into another plane. This is when strange goings-on began to happen to that plane. In 1973, even the vice president of the airliner went to sit down in his seat when he saw a captain in full uniform. He went over for a chat and was shocked to find that he was actually talking to the ghost of Bob Loft. Loft then just vanished in front of his eyes. Now I know some of you might not believe in ghosts, and that's okay, but the vice president of the airliner was so shocked and scared that he rushed over to find a crew member. He was terrified that it was an omen that something bad would happen to the flight. No crew member though could find the mysterious Bob Loft. A few months later, crew boarding the same aircraft were surprised to see Loft on board the plane. They were so shaken that they had to cancel the flight. Even passengers were left hysterical after reporting of a captain talking to them and then disappearing right in front of their eyes. When investigators looked into the case, they showed pictures to the passengers and they all pointed to the picture of Bob Loft and Don Repo. One flight engineer was doing a routine pre-flight inspection when Repo appeared to him and said, "You don't need to worry about the pre-flight, I've already done it." The airline tried to sweep the sighting under the carpet, as they didn't want passengers believing that the plane was haunted by dead pilots and engineers. One sighting though changed everything. A stewardess was in the galley preparing the meals for the passengers. As she reached for the handle of the oven door, she was shocked to see the face of Don Repo staring back at her. She didn't panic and got another stewardess and the aircraft's engineer to come with her to take a look. Sure enough, when they returned, Repo's face still stared out from the oven. Suddenly, all three clearly heard the apparition mutter the words, "Watch out for fire in this plane." The flight reached Mexico City safely, but on the return leg, problems began with the aircraft's engine. After an inspection, the aircraft was cleared to take off, but later the engine failed. It was quickly shut down before it caught fire, and they returned to the airport. Thankfully, no one was hurt during the incident, but the crew was understandably shaken. In the end, the salvaged parts of the plane that crashed were removed, and the ghostly sightings stopped. Number 3. It's every parent's worst nightmare. On 5th of May 1957, John and Florence Pollock was on their way to church when suddenly their life was totally torn apart. As they walked to church, a car driver lost control and hit their two daughters. Jacqueline, who was 6 years old, and Joanna, who was 11 years old, tragically died instantly on impact. One of their friends, Anthony, also died in the accident. Both John and Florence were destroyed by their loss. Due to John's belief in reincarnation, he took comfort that maybe one day their children would be reunited with them. Just a few months later, Florence was pregnant. Now this is when things get a bit mysterious. The doctors confirmed that Florence was pregnant, but against doctors' opinion, John seemed to know that she would give birth to twin girls. Sure enough, less than a year later after the accident, Florence gave birth to two daughters that they named Gillian and Jennifer. John noticed that Jennifer had a strange white line across her forehead, similar to her dead sister's Jacqueline's scar from a bike accident that she had when she was young. When he checked the baby's leg, she also had the birthmark at the same exact place to where Jacqueline's birthmark was. Now it gets even more bizarre, if that's even possible. As the girls got older, they seemed to want to visit certain landmarks that their passed away sisters had visited, and even pointed at their dead sister's school, saying it was their school. They personally never saw or were told about the landmarks or school before, so how did they know that Joanna and Jacqueline ever visited those locations? To John and Florence, this confirmed that their older daughters were reincarnated through the twin daughters Gillian and Jennifer. When the twins were given toys that belonged to their older siblings, the twin sisters seemed to know the exact names that were given to the toys. When the girls turned 5, their memories of their past lives seemed to vanish overnight, and they now live normal lives. The case has turned out to be one of the most fascinating cases of reincarnations. Do you believe in reincarnation? Number 4. Glowing lights are appearing in the desert outside of West Texas since the 1800s. Witnesses have reported that floating lights known as Martha lights are appearing of different colours. The size of the lights are reported to being the size of basketballs and have been twinkling in the sky, and then at great speed they just seem to vanish. The first reported case came in 1883 when Robert Ellison claimed to have seen flashing lights in the sky. He assumed it could have been from Apache campfires. When investigating, Robert and other settlers could never find evidence of a campfire. Nowadays, even scientists try and find explanations into what is causing this possible phenomena. One theory is that it could be headlights from vehicles on US Highway 67, but most think the lights would be too dim as the highway is just too far. Plus, it hardly explains for the sightings that occurred back in the 1800s. Other theories range from gases to the paranormal, where some believe UFOs are visiting the area. What do you believe is causing the lights over the lonely deserts? Number 5. Since early civilization, humans have been obsessed to finding a way of becoming immortal, a way to live forever. Well, there's a mysterious case of a man who called himself as Count de Saint Deja Man. Some called him the man who would never die. No records of his birth and origins exist. He was a genius in music, art, politics and alchemy. He could speak 12 languages. He was an accomplished painter. He also seemed to have great wealth, but there were no signs of him even owning a bank account. He was known by many of the most famous figures of European history, even the US President, George Washington, and the likes of Casanova. Casanova later claimed that Saint Deja Man told him that he was over 300 years old, and that he found the secrets of universal medicine. Some people said they have known him for over 50 years and he never seemed to age. His knowledge in history was so advanced that it made some believe if he was actually there during the time. the Count de Saint Deja Man discovered the secrets of eternal life. Officially, Saint Deja Man died in his home on February 27, 1784. When his possessions were going to be auctioned, there were no items of wealth. Did Saint Deja Man really die? Well, there were reports where people said he was seen throughout the 19th century and even the 20th century. Sounds impossible, but so does a person who never ages at all for a supposed 70 years. Now this part is extremely bizarre. Official records of Freemasonry shows that they chose Saint Deja Man as their representative for a confession in 1785. How could they choose someone that already passed away? Other reports from people of high power also reported speaking to Saint Deja Man way past the date of his death, even up to 1820. It's definitely my kind of mystery.